Excellent. So we're waiting for more people to come in. So just give me a little background on how you found out about this particular meeting, workshop. Was it by way of an email? Was it Facebook? Or what? How did you get information about tonight's this evening's class?
Hi, Michael. This is Laura. I received the information about your class from Steve, the president of the Florida Suicide Prevention Coalition.
Okay, yeah, y'all do a lot of good things. I'm glad you're here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm here representing the Suicide Prevention Training Institute here in Tampa, Florida.
Okay, and let me ask you, so you are a 501c3, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I mean, some of the things you're gonna learn tonight is where the money is and how to get the money.
I'm hoping to learn a lot about that. Thank you.
Not a problem. Anybody else? Tell me who you are and what, if any, nonprofit that you represent.
My name is Corinthia Harper, and I represent North Carolina Families United.
Oh man, I got like about 6 people from your group that are coming. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I said, wow, y'all must have brought the whole office to tonight's meeting. So thank you for coming to tonight's this evening's presentation. Next, who are you and where you from? Patrice, who are you and where you from?
I'm Patrice. I'm in Florida and I have a nonprofit organization and I'm looking to know how to write grants.
Good. So tell me, what type of nonprofit?
I have a nonprofit helping families with kids with disabilities.
Okay. I work with a number of groups that's focusing on that particular area. So tonight, not only are you going to learn about how to write a grant, but you're also going to learn about how to start a nonprofit, how to operate a nonprofit, how to finance a nonprofit, and more importantly, how to grow a nonprofit. Tonight's presentation is going to be a comprehensive, holistic approach to grant development and nonprofit development. Among the other services that we provide includes board training, business development, grant writing, strategic planning, government procurement, policies and procedures, and a number of other different programs to strengthen and build the capacity of the nonprofit. Now, I've got one, is that Cameron? Can you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Yes, my name is Cameron and I'm with North Carolina Families United also.
Okay, hold on, someone is saying something to me in the chat room. Yeah, make sure everybody put in your email in the chat room because after you complete this particular class in about a week or less, I'll be getting all of you your certificates. That's important because when you're writing a grant, folks want to know what type of training did you take, and you can put that in there. So make sure you put your email in the text box so that I can email you your certificate. Okay, does anybody have the time? Can anybody give me the time? What time is it?
6:34.
6:34. So let's give it about 5 more minutes to let people come in, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So I did pose a question earlier and asked if anybody had ever taken a grant writing class before. because we tend to have both folks that have never taken a grant writing class, and even individuals that have been writing grants for years to take our class. Because what they do is it brings them up to par as to what's going on in the grant market since they last took a grant course. Okay, I'm gonna give it about 3 or 5 more minutes, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started. We are expecting a lot of people this evening. So what would happen is they will probably bounce in as we move on in the class, but I'm not gonna wait for them. I'm gonna give them a little bit more time because it's not fair to you that I wait too long until getting the class started. I can say that what we found when people have taken our classes is that they leave away with a wealth of information, a wealth of insight that they never had been exposed to before. These classes are based on the classes given by the government, institutions of higher learning, and other groups that do grant writing. What we did was to take all of those different approaches and put them into one approach. We call it a holistic and comprehensive approach to grant development as well as nonprofit development. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me bring in the presentation, and as people come in, they can join us. Again, my name is Michael Randolph, and I'm with the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development. We provide a whole host of different types of training programs. Tonight's training program is on how to start, operate, and finance, as well as grow a nonprofit. Our mission is to strengthen organizations that strengthen communities, in short. I talked earlier that we had a whole list of different services that we provide, and before you are those different services, anywhere from working with folks, not only in preparing a grant, but also in terms of teaching them how to write a grant. We do have in-depth classes anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks that we do in terms of how to do grant writing. We also do business preparation as well as how to do a business plan, program development and evaluation, government procurement, organizational development and capacity building, and of course, how to do 501c3. So as you see, I've only highlighted some of the different things that we do, mostly the ones in red, but we also do the ones in green as well. So a little bit about me. I've been doing this for well over 20 years. It's more like 30 years in terms of working with nonprofits and writing grants. I started early on in 1980. I started as a community organizer. And from there, I went to a community strategist, to program developer, definitely focus on high stress neighborhoods and putting together comprehensive approaches. The Center for Nonprofit and Community Development started in 2011. The objective was to provide technical support in the area of effective skill sets for startup and existing businesses. We specialize in developing neighborhood planning and economic development initiatives and poverty-stricken communities. We focus on how to create national and best practice models. That's important because when you want to write a grant, The funders want to know, is this a model that can be used in any other place in the United States? That's what we call national model. And best practice meaning that you can show that your program really works. To date, we've assisted over 1,800 nonprofits. Those include government agencies, faith-based groups, businesses, and individuals. We have provided assistance in actually getting that nonprofit started to over 300 nonprofits that we work with to do that paperwork. So currently we're in 12 states, but those 12, we only have 10 up here. These states that we're talking about is states that we actually have worked with people to start that nonprofit. In California, to Florida, Baltimore, throughout the United States. There are 2 states that's not up here that we also provide information on how to start that nonprofit. In addition to that, we're all over the state of Florida in terms of areas that we worked in terms of getting those nonprofits started. You might even know somebody that we're connected to. This is a little bit about my accomplishments. So one thing I want to emphasize that I work with teams of groups to put over $75 million in terms of grants. That is, it might have been a group that's gone for a grant for 1,000. Another group might have been gone for a group for 10 million. So totally it's $75 million in which I participate in assisting in preparing grants. These are some of my other accomplishments. I'll send you a PowerPoint presentation. You can read this at your leisure. What I do want you to take away is that I've been around and I've got a lot of background in terms of what I do. As a matter of fact, I've spoken at Johns Hopkins University. I've spoken at the University of Florida in terms of best practices, not only in community development, economic development, but also nonprofit development as well. So tonight we're here for the purpose of what is a 501c3 and what are the different papers that you have to have in order. So what are your takeaways from tonight's class? By the end of tonight's class, you should be able to know what is a nonprofit, what are bylaws, what's a purpose statement, what are articles of incorporation, what's a conflict of interest policy, what are solicitation requirements, what's a 1023 application. You should be able to know how to get your employee identification number, and then you should be able to have what are your next steps. So a nonprofit is a tax-exempt organization that serves the public interest. It's not interested in serving its own interests, but it serves a public interest. And that interest could be educational, charitable examples. There are over 29 different types of what we call 501c. Tonight's class, we're going to be talking about 501c3. Well, a 501c3 is important because people are able to take deductions on their taxes if they give money to a 501c3. When you start a nonprofit, some of the things that you should have already put together before you start to file your legal paper is you should be able to start with what's your purpose? Why do you do what you do? What do you do? What's your vision? What is your organization beliefs related to what are the ideal conditions that should exist when you finish? You should have a mission. That mission should describe your groups, what your group is doing, what your group is going to do, and why it's doing what it do. Bylaws. Bylaws, if you drop the by, we have laws. So bylaws are actually the laws to your organization. It is written rules by which your organization is governed. Some of the things that you should have, well, you should have all of these, but I'm just going to emphasize this quite a few because of time. You should have a definition of your board. You should have a number of board of directors, at least 3 board of directors. You should be doing your annual, regular, and special meetings. You should have committees. And you also should have a statement in your article, your bylaws to state that no one can speak on your organization unless the board of directors has designated that person to speak on behalf of your organization. Articles of incorporation is the first set of documents that you file with the state. Your articles of incorporation is what make you legal. You file a document with the state, it's a legal document asking the state to recognize you as a legal entity. Some of the things you want to have in your articles of incorporation is your name, duration, your purpose. You should talk about dissolution is important because what IRS wants to know is what you want to do after if the nonprofit should dissolve. Basically, what happens is that you will give everything and all that assets and money to another nonprofit, a church, or the government. You cannot split that money up among board members. Conflict of interest. A conflict of interest is when people think that they can get a private benefit as a part of being part of your organization. That becomes a conflict of interest. The only person that should get paid on your board of director is the CEO, because that person runs a direct day-to-day operation. A conflict of interest would arise if a board member is benefited financially as a result of being part of your board of directors. Your EIN number is like your social security number, but it's your employee's number, your corporate number. Now we go to the application itself, which is a 1023. Once you file your articles of incorporation, your next task is to file what's known as the 1023 form, in which you're asking IRS to give you the status as a 501c3. There are 2 types of ways to do this. You can do a streamline, that's that is $275, or you can do the complete application, that's $600 to $700. The difference in the 2 applications is the one that's the lower amount. Basically, what you're saying to IRS, we don't have any money, we're just getting started. The other one is when you say we got money, and so we can afford to pay for the more in-depth application. Once you get your tax exempt status from the feds, your next step is to file for your state exemption. So if you go to a store, you don't have to pay sales taxes. This is important. In every state in the United States, if you start a nonprofit, you must ask that state for the right to solicit donation and monetary benefits. In the state of Florida, it's what's known as a 10-100. Failure to file this can result in penalties from the state, as well as possible criminal charges. Okay, so we talked about what it takes to create a nonprofit. Want to move now to the section that deals with the grant and what does it take to put together a grant. But before I do so, I want to get a feedback from folks as to whether or not any questions related to how to start a nonprofit before we move on to the grant. Everybody good? Okay, let's go for the moolah. this section, by the end, you should be able to describe what are the different types of grants, describe the different types of grantors, identify research tools that you can use to go after grants. There's literally over 5,000 to 7,000 foundations and corporations that give money. We're going to talk about how do you find out where those organizations are, because you cannot find them if you try to Google it on the internet. And we're going to talk about what software you can use in order to get them, so you can increase your chances of getting money. We're also going to talk about the fundamentals of writing a grant, the proposal process, concept, letter of intent, and we're also going to identify some new grant terms. And then what you should be thinking about at the end of this is your next steps. So, what are the types of grants? There are a number of different types of grants. You have your unrestricted grant. Funds may be, an unrestricted grant, funds may be used for general support purposes. That is, it can be, when you get this grant, you can use it for anything related to general support for your purpose. Restricted grants, and you write something to find a unrestricted grant. Restricted grants are more or less restricted to what you can spend that money on. One type is program or project grants. Now, let's give an example. If you get a restricted grant for a program and you work with at-risk youth, you can only work with at-risk youth. It's restricted. If you got an unrestricted grant, you can work with any youth that you want to work with. So restricted means that you're restricted on who you can use that money for, and those agreements should occur during the initial preparation of your grant as to what it is that the organization wants you to focus on and how you're going to focus on. The second is what's known as seed money. And seed money is for new innovative projects, but it's also for if you're just getting started and you want to bring on your first employee. The first employee should be the CEO, because the CEO runs the day-to-day operation. The CEO then is responsible for bringing in more money to take you operation. Then that's what's known as capital grants. And capital grants is if you want to buy a building or a piece of land. Then after that is what's known as endowment grants. As you know, most colleges and universities get someone to give money to them. So that's called an endowment. Normally nonprofits don't get endowments. It's mostly universities and schools, but someone can give it an endowment if they choose to. Then you have what's known as challenge grants. Let's say you wrote a grant for $100,000 and the organization say to you, we'll give you 80,000, but you have to come up with the remaining 20,000. Then finally, we have what's known as in-kind support. Now, there are different types of grantees. So let's talk about the different types of grantees. You got, and this can be individuals. It can be individuals, for example, a grantor. And an individual grantor is someone that normally, I have to take a pause for 1 second. Please bear with me, give me 1 second. Okay, I apologize for that. So back to the class. Again, there are different types of grantees. The first one is an individual like you and I. By far, 80% of grants come from individuals that give money. That is a greater majority of the fund come from individuals. That's why you definitely want to be able to convince individual people how important it is for them to give money to your organization. By far, the largest amount is individual. Now, as you can see, there are advantages and disadvantages to who you should choose, whether or not you should go after an individual grantor. The next type is what's known as family and community foundation. A family foundation is any foundation in which there's a biological connection, like Bill Gates and the Clinton Foundation. Those type of foundation are people are biologically connected to each other. And then you have what's known as community foundation. Well, community foundation are those foundations that focus specifically on the community. Like, for example, you have the Hillsborough County Children's Board. They will only give money if you're in Hills County. You might have the New York Foundation. Well, they will only give if you're in New York, in a particular community in New York. And then what you have is what's known as corporate foundation. Now, by law, corporate foundation must give up to 5 to 6% of their net proceeds out every year to 501c3s in order to maintain their status as a corporate foundation. Contrary to popular belief, a corporation give money not because they're trying to get a tax break, because they got good tax lawyers, they don't really pay taxes. They give because of their social responsibility. They want to show that, hey, we make a lot of money, but we also help the community. And then you have what's known as federated funds. That's like the United Way. And then finally, you have government funds. By far, the hardest and most complex grants that you can write are government funds. So we talked earlier about where do you find the money at? And here's a list of the different tools to find grants. Notice I highlight the Foundation Center and grants.gov. The Foundation Center is a great source. What they've done is to put together a clearinghouse of all of the funders in the United States and beyond. And when you go there, you can put in, for example, you want money for New York, for youth, and you want to know only people that give 10,000 or more. When you hit that button, all of those entities will come up that's given that money. The other tool that I use that's in red is grant.gov. If you're trying to go for a federal grant, then you go to grant.gov, and this is where you will fill out the application. But be warned, the hardest grants is government grants. They can be monster. That's why we teach how to do government grants, foundation grants, and corporation grants in our more intense class. Now, how do you increase the chances of getting that particular grant? Know this, when you go for a grant, literally probably hundreds of other people are also going for that grant. So it's very, very, I can't emphasize, very competitive. Okay, that being said, let's move forward. Here's the full process to increase your chances of getting that grant. First, make sure you follow the guidelines as well as the forms that you need to complete. Try to talk to somebody that received that grant in the past. Try to talk to someone that was part of the team that awarded that grant, and try to contact the program officers. You can get all this information from the Foundation Center. For example, let's say you're going for a grant with the Bank of America. You go to the Foundation Center, you say, who received grants from the foundation in 2022? And get that information. Okay, now, once we got an understanding of where the money is, now we go to actually beginning to put together the grant proposal. The first thing we start with is what we call a statement of the problem. That is, what's wrong and what are you trying to solve? When we talk about a statement of the problem, and it's also called a need statement, we're talking about the specific conditions that you want to change. For example, you have a mother that lost her child to street violence. Well, in her statement of problem, it will be focused on how to stop young people from killing each other. So we have to start with a statement of the problem. Some of the things that should be in your statement of the problem include evidence to support that there is a problem. And we're going to talk about that later on when we talk about evaluation. That statement of the problem to talk about who's affected by that problem. This should talk about how they are affected by that problem. And you need to use what's known as both quantitative and qualitative research. We're going to talk about that in just a second in order to gather the data necessary to make an argument that you understand the problem. Quantitative research is about the numbers and the why. In quantitative research, in the case of that mother that lost her child to street violence, in quantitative research, she would go to Google how many young people lost their life, for example, in the city of Tampa in 2021. So she got the numbers. Then she would go next and put in what's the leading cause for youth violence. And she would get information from institutions of higher learning and other people that actually specialize in explaining that. Again, that's what we call quantitative research. Quantitative research is more subjective. This is when we're trying to get a statement of the problem from the people that's most affected by it. So in this case, the mother would put together a group of teens, maybe take them to McDonald's, and she would ask them, and this is what we call a focus group. She would ask the young people, why is there so much killing? What can stop you from killing? And things of that nature. That's what we call qualitative research, is when you're getting information from the actually individual that's affected by it. In quantitative research, we can use focus groups, interviews, and surveys, etc. Now, again, basically, quantitative research is objective and qualitative research is subjective. Here's a couple of sites that you can go to start to gather up data. I use this in probably about another 20 to 30 different research tools to go out and find out what is the statement of the problem. That's important because you have to really be able to make an argument. And you have to back it up with statistics to show that you know what you're doing. Now, you got the problem together. Now, the next step is to put together the program design and the approach that you plan to take in order to solve the problem. So, you want to be able to conceptualize how you plan to move forward. And the first thing you do this is by creating a goal. A goal is really about the final impact or outcome that you wish to bring about. In the case of the mother that lost her child, to violence in the streets. Her goal, for example, would be to end senseless killing among young people. The next part of that is to talk about what is your strategy? How do you plan to do it? What is your plan of action, the process you're going to use, and the method you're going to use? And her strategy might be connect with area schools and other nonprofits to work collectively with them in solving the problem. Once you identify your strategy, your next step is to identify what is your objective. That is, your objective should specify the outcome of your project. So what does that mean? The outcome of your project. So in that particular case, the mother would say the objective is to work with 30 at-risk youth from the city of Tampa and creating a positive mindset. Now that objective should be specific, immediate, measurable, practical, logical, and you should be able to evaluate it. In terms of your objectives, you can do an objective that's trying to change the behavior. Is that so? One that's program performance, one that's process, or one that's product. These are the different types of objectives. So let's go and look at some examples. Example one, they want to, and their particular goal is to support at least 600 dropouts from high schools to attain their high school diploma or equivalency level of certification. Example two, program strategy. They plan to conduct high school equivalency training program for at-risk youth. Objective, long-term objective, and this is another objective for another group. They're saying that by December the 30th, 2010, they want to increase the baseline to 65% of the hypertension of patients at community health center whose blood pressure is under control. So they got a long-term plan of dealing with high blood pressure. And you can know from reading this, apparently the problem in this particular objective is how they have to do with high blood pressure. Now you got it together. You got all your concept together, and now it's time to put together the program design. The program design is also known as a method section, and some people call it the work plan. The method section describes your project activities in detail, indicating how your objectives will be accomplished. It should include the following. It should talk about your objective. It should talk about what are your personnel needs, your staffing requirement, qualification, and job description. You should talk about what facilities do you need, what equipment do you need, what materials do you need. It should actually be another word for program. It should talk about the scope of services that you plan to provide and the time frame as to how you're going to do it. It should give a detailed description on what's going to happen from the beginning to the end. For example, your first 30 to 45 days, you should be talking about this is when we're going to bring staff on board. Your next cycle from 45 and beyond should talk about here's how we're going to do outreach in order to get people to join the program. And then your final phase is actually operational, and once you got the students and the staff and the place, and you actually are administrating the program. So the first part of the grant is known as introduction. Your introduction really is talking about giving credibility to your organization. It talks about your organization qualification and any professional experience that you've gathered. For a private foundation, it should be extensive. Anywhere from a half a page to a whole page. Notice when you're writing a government grant, it's not as intense in terms of introduction. But when you're going for a private foundational grant, you want to really do at least up to a half a page, if not more. Conclusion. Now we come to the point where you're going to more or less summarize everything that you talked about in your proposal. Every proposal should have a concluding paragraph or two. This is a good place to call attention to the future after the grant is completed. The other important thing about this this part of the proposal is that this is when you can get emotional. Normally, not during any part of the grant should you get emotional, but you can get emotional when you get to the conclusion. So in the case of the mother that lost her child to street violence, this is when she would say, I do this not because of money, but I do this because I lost a child to street violence, and I want to make sure that no mother or no father or no family member, or no friend have to experience the pain that I experienced. And then we come to how do you get information about what you do? And that can be your newsletter, your project letter, your website, displays at meeting, and press release. What's important about this section is this is when you recognize who gave you money. So somewhere during your literature, be it your website, your pamphlets, it should be, or press release, it should be donated by or funded by. The grant itself and the appearance of the grant itself should be, and we're going to talk about that next, making sure you follow what the funder wants you to follow. Your appendix. Your appendix should include a reprint of news articles about your organization, list of board of directors, officers and their titles, annual reports, organizational physical report, past success stories, and list of supporters. Appearance is very important in terms of your organizational presentation. Make sure you follow what the funder has asked you for. If they ask you to number your pages, number your pages. If they ask you to double space, make sure you double space. When you look at the proposal, they're going to tell you exactly how they want you, the format to use to submit that proposal. Make sure you follow suit. Evaluation. Now we get to the section, how are you going to prove what you say you're going to do? Now, there are two measurements that we use. One is called program evaluation, and we're going to talk about different types of evaluation. And the other is program measurements. How are you going to measure success? One of the evaluation tools that we use is known as the goal-based evaluation. Goal-based evaluation are evaluating the extent to which your programs are meeting predetermined goals and objectives. You'll be surprised at the organization that stray away from their original goals and objectives. So this is how you evaluate to make sure you're consistent with your initial goals and objectives based on your process and your activities and the outcome. The next type of evaluation is what's known as an outcome-based evaluation. And the tool that we use for this evaluation is known as a logic model. A logic model asks the what, the how, the who, the why, the evidence, the where, and the when. Finally, in terms of models for evaluation, we have what's known as a theory of change. A theory of change is known as a process evaluation. Notice in your section that's called specific intervention, this is when you begin to break down how you're going to do what you're going to do. In this case, they're going to provide individualized tutoring 3 times a week for 20 minutes based on building blocks, literacy skills, etc. So during your intervention section, this is when you break down your program. For example, how often do they attend? And what is it that you plan to provide? Now, notice your process or theory of change also includes your community problem and your outcome, just like your logic model. The organization itself, this is critical to get money. You need to be able to ask, why does your organization exist? Who are you? What programs and activities do you propose to solve? How will you implement those programs? And finally, how much money do you need? Your organization should have policies and procedures, staffing, funding, sustainability, physical control, and you should be able to do what's known as a SWOT analysis. In addition to that, your organization should have a 5-year strategic plan. That 5-year strategic plan should consist of goals, your strategies, your objectives, your tactics, your operation and methods, and finally, your budget. We talked earlier about a SWOT analogy, and if y'all familiar with doing business, your SWOT analogy includes your strengths, your weaknesses, your threats, and your opportunities. Now, the core component of any organization should be, what are your values? That is, what do you believe? What is your mission? That is, why do you exist? What is your vision? That is, where are you going? What's your strategy? That is, how we will get there, and what are your tactics in terms of what will we do to get there? The other key pieces that you should have as you grow as a nonprofit is a business plan. And the business plan is different than a strategic plan. A strategic plan is external. It looks from the organization within to look at how you can build it. And a business plan only deals with how you can bring in the money. And then you have your operational plan that deals with how do you operate. Then you have financial management, fundraising, safety and risk management, marketing plan and branding, partnerships and collaboratives. Funding, how do you get the money? What's important about funders, they want to know what happens after the grant that you receive ends. What do you do to get more money? I put together what's known as a social entrepreneurship model. This model right here focuses on how to bring in money beyond grants. We call it earned income. Earned income is ways that you look at in terms of starting your own business in order to bring in money. So there are 4 parts to this particular piece right here. One is input. Input is how the money come in. It comes in from grants, fees for services, development fees, consultant fees, and own and operate your business. Yes, as a nonprofit, you can start a business as long as that business is consistent with your purpose. In the case of the mother that lost that child, if she decided to start a t-shirt shop, for example, or she can actually start a T-shirt and have the youth run it. And it's not taxable because it's within the purpose of the program for the youth. On the other hand, if she did a senior citizen program, then she would actually have to pay taxes on that. But you can start any business as long as it's consistent with what your purpose is. Now, then you have output, that is what programs are you going to fund? Then you have outcomes. What are the things that's going to happen to measure how you change that person? Anywhere from increase in employment, affordable housing, or anything that your nonprofit does. And then finally, you have what's known as what are going to be the benefits, the return on the investment that your funders have put in. It can be anywhere related to the city, in which you say, we're going to increase the tax base because we're working with new businesses to get started. Or also of interest to the city is that what we're doing is going to reduce city services and public safety. The budget, all about the moolah. So your budget is more or less a statement of your expenditures. It's another way of expressing your project. There are different types of different parts of a budget. Different types of costs related to the budget. You got your direct costs, in which you're directly paying for your staff, friends benefits, equipment, supplies, travel, etc. And then you have indirect costs, better known as administrative costs. Administrative costs are those costs associated with what you need to do in terms of for the organization to operate. In this case, you need a lawyer. That lawyer doesn't work directly with your client, but you need that person. You need an accountant. This is what we call indirect costs. Costs indirectly occur as a result of the program. Then you have cost sharing. If you want to share the cost with another person, then we have in-kind support that you can use. In-kind support, another name for that is known as pro bono. So that brings us to the end of this particular presentation. Again, we do provide assistance for any of you who want to start your nonprofit. I'll be sending you information on that. But we also have this in-depth class that's anywhere from 4 to 8, it might be 4 to 12. It's very intense on how to actually write that grant. Now, people that normally take this grant do it for 2 reasons. First, they're taking it because they want to learn how to write grant for the organization itself. Second, they take it because they want to make a side hustle. Because grant writers get anywhere from $500 up to $10,000 per grant. So they do it as a side hustle to make extra money. So that being said, I want to get some feedback as to what are your takeaways from the night's class? Was it informative? Did you learn anything? Somebody give me some feedback. Anybody?
Yes, it was very informative. I think one of the biggest things for me is the part you just talked about being able to start a business as long as it
Yes.
coincides with the purpose. I never really knew that, and that was very informational.
Yes, it's called entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship or social enterprise. It's a new school, next generation approach to nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits simply go for grants. And the problem is that grants run out. So you have to have different streams of income that does come in. Again, for those of you that are part of this class, make sure you put in your email so I can send you your certificate as well as more information about what we do in terms of grant writing as well as the startup nonprofit service. So anybody else, you want to say anything else before we get out here this evening?
Yes, hi, Michael. This is Laurel. I want to thank you for your time. One of the things that I thought was very beneficial is the information that you provided on where to look for grants.
Yes.
I've had, I've written a couple, I've been successful in a couple, but it's always trying to find that grant that is the most difficult. And then I have one question for you. Will we have access to the slides, after this presentation?
Well, if you put your email in the chat box.
Great, I have. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Now, this back to the information about the grant search. The reason why you increase your chances of grant searches using that software, because now you know where anywhere from 5,000, 10,000 people that's giving money. Normally, the way we find grants is by word of mouth, or we might Google it. And if you Google it, you'll only find 1% of the funders and foundation that's giving money. When you use that software that we talked about, you have access to thousands of potential funders. Okay, anybody else before we roll out tonight? So I do want to thank everybody for attending tonight's class. We're giving classes now on a weekly basis because of so many people that are attending. Our last class we did, we had like 45 people from around the country to attend that class. So we give it every week so people don't have to be in classes where you have a lot of people, because normally when we have a lot of people that attend the class, we can't ask as many answer as many questions. So that being said, I'm about to roll out. Again, I want to thank you for attending tonight's class. Again, this is one of the most comprehensive, holistic grant classes that you will take, because it's a combination of lessons learned from around different people that do grants, from Institution of Higher Learning to groups that do grant writing as a profession, all that, and my own experience in writing grant. That's what makes this a unique grant writing class. So again, before we get out of here, anybody else want to say anything else? Okay, if that's the case, again, thank you for attending class tonight. Hopefully we can do some business in the future.